So I'm actually going to mix it up here, and I'm actually going to go from the bottom to the top. So I'm going to start. Worst character in the game, in my opinion. It's time. It is time again to do another tier list video. It's been a while since I've done one of these. The last time I did this was almost 6 months ago, and the game has changed quite a bit since then in terms of characters being developed. You know, Ultimate was pretty new, so at the time there wasn't much of a idea on a lot of the customs, but I think now is a good time. You know, I've let the characters play out, develop. There's obviously not going to be a patch anymore, so this is the final version of the game. Now we know pretty much where the characters to see at this point. I don't think the character tier list is going to change too much, so this is going to be my final tier list. I'm done after this. I'm not making another one. This is the last one I'm going to make. This is my final opinion on where each character sits in the game. So let's just jump into the tier list and let me know what you guys think. Alright, so we're into the tier list now. I haven't put any characters on yet, but just before I start, I want to say that I think every character in this game is pretty strong. I think there's obviously stronger and there's weaker characters, but overall, every character is pretty decent in this game. I could easily go on for like over an hour on why each character's in each spot, but I think a lot of you guys know at this point, so I'm kind of just going to briefly go over them. I'm not going to go into crazy detail, just to make the video shorter, a bit more entertaining, and more to the point. So I'm actually going to mix it up here, and I'm actually going to go from the bottom to the top. So I'm going to start. The worst character in the game, in my opinion, my man's Rambo. I honestly think he's the worst in the game. Like I said, low tier being worse, it doesn't mean you're absolutely trash, but compared to the top tier and the mid tier, you're definitely not as strong. The main thing for Rambo is just his damage isn't amazing if people are caught jumping. So if he hits you in the air, it's not amazing. He's not amazing against breakaway either, unless you have the snare trap, you can kind of make the read. But he doesn't have amazing armor breaks in terms of combos a lot of the time in conversions. He can work in some matchups, and he does have some gimmicks that can kind of work out for him. But overall, long term, I don't think he's a very good character. Okay, the next character I'm going to put there is Molina. I know Molina recently won a tournament. You guys probably saw my video on that. I still think she's pretty low. She could possibly be mid, but I'm going to put her here for now because I still have my reasons on why I think she's not very good. So the main reasons I think she's down here is really just breakaway really hurts her. She doesn't get much damage if you break because like roll can be broken out of so early. That's probably one of the biggest reasons I think she's kind of weak, to be honest. A lot of her conversions are actually pretty good in the air, but again, breakaway kind of just kills that. As soon as there's a ball roll, like, you can just get out so early. Her buttons are okay, but she doesn't have really any good frame traps, to be honest. She doesn't have like a plus frame type of frame trap game. Her throw game isn't amazing, but it's also not too bad. But just because of breakaway, the throw game isn't really that scary because you can always just jump and get hit. And like worst case, you just break and lose like 10%. So the risk reward for her on a throw is pretty bad for the most part. So overall, just risk reward for like her throw game and breakaway just doesn't really help her out in the long run. It makes it really hard to win just with her consistently. If you have another secondary, maybe you can use her in another character. But just her on her own, really hard. Honestly, in my opinion, these are the only two characters that are low tier. I think Shao Kahn is pretty close, but I think he actually sits in the mid now. So that's where I'm going to put him next. Now, I know a lot of you guys are probably going to be hating on that one. You're going to be like, where's Shao Kahn's low tier? He's still trash. Honestly, his risk reward is so good for him in a lot of situations that I think he's mid tier now. I think Shao Kahn, he definitely still has some struggles sometimes. But overall, I think he's a pretty good character. His story game's pretty good. His buttons are actually all pretty good, to be honest. Obviously, he has the floor spot gap, but you can always mix it up now, especially with the new down back 4 buff. So, like, he has plenty of ways to mix it up and kind of change up the game. Is he an amazing character? Probably not. Is he decent now? Yeah, I would say so. I think compared to his previous version, I don't think he's anywhere near that. You know, the down back 4 is actually a huge buff, and he's getting huge damage now, like in the corner, especially meterless, even mid-screen meterless. The risk reward against him a lot of the time is in his favor, so I think he's a pretty good character now. Also, keep in mind, the mid and low tier are not ordered, so I'm just putting them in just as I go through. Alright, I'm going to put Frost in next. Obviously, she's a decent character. Like I said, everyone in mid is pretty good. It's just at the higher levels and compared to the top tiers, they're not as strong. So the main thing for Frost really is just her throw game isn't amazing because she doesn't have a real shimmy, so she can't mix up her throw that well. And if she throws you like full screen and she doesn't get much reward from it anyway. Obviously, her buttons and her neutral are really good, but other than that, she can never really make good comebacks, and she doesn't have amazing pressure either. But I still think she's a pretty decent character. I'm going to be saying that a lot, so just be prepared that I'm going to tell you that every character is decent probably. Okay, next character I'm going to put in is Baraka. I think he's pretty good, but he's very slow. And if he doesn't get in, he's not going to do that much either. His projectiles are like okay, but if you have the life lead against Baraka and he can't get in, it's really easy to win. So besides his projectile game and him doing like random stuff to get in, he's not going to really be able to control the neutral that well. If he's not in, or if he's like mid-range, he's not really going to threaten you that much. Yeah, he has the projectiles, but outside of that, what can he do in the mid-range? maybe like a random forward 4, but he doesn't really have the buttons to kind of back up what he has. So once he's in, obviously he's really good, but he has to get in, and a lot of matchups can easily keep him out. So I'm going to put him there. All right, next up in the list, I'm going to put Davora. She's a pretty good character, but she doesn't play the game amazingly well because of her slow buttons, and her throw game isn't insane either. Obviously, she has good setups, but you need to get the hit, which isn't too hard. Her jumping's obviously amazing, but like her throw mix game isn't crazy. It's usually low damage because like 1-2 teleport doesn't combo. You can do little vortexes with like overpositor down back 4, but overall like you're not doing that much damage unless you do the teleport combos, and you don't get them from jab. And you don't get them on airborne either. So, like, her throw game isn't amazing, but everything else is pretty good about her. So, her defense isn't amazing because, like, she has a slower poke, and her up 3 is punishable. So, once she gets knocked down, it's kind of easier to, like, maul her on defense. So, I put her in the bottom half of the mid just because I think, like, she can win, and she's pretty decent, but against some players and some characters, it can be a lot harder as well. Alright, next up, I'm going to put Sonia. I actually think she's pretty decent because of her zoning. But other than that, she's literally got nothing, to be honest. Like, she has the mix-ups, obviously, but you're relying on mix-ups to win the game, and I'm never a big fan of that. Both of the overhead and low options are unsafe, so you can play that risky mix-up game, but I don't think that's really consistent in the long run. And obviously, she has great projectiles, but she has some hard matchups for sure. Her buttons aren't great, and it's pretty easy to mash on Sonya. So it's kind of similar to the Davora thing. So that's the main reason why I'll put her in the lower half of mid. Alright, next up I'm going to put Scarlet in. Scarlet is a character that has so many tools and can play so many mind games, but the force block gaps and stuff still do really hurt her, to be honest. Like, obviously she can play around them and mix it up and do strings and staggers to mix it up, but the fact that she has to make so many right reads to kind of win sometimes can be really hard for her. She's definitely not a bad character by any means. It's just you have to work hard with her sometimes. Similar to these characters. Honestly, these characters have something in common where they have to work harder than the others a lot of the time. Baraka maybe not, and Shao Kahn maybe not because of their damage. But long-term consistency, these characters have to work pretty hard. Also, just side note, the low tiers could probably just go to mid tier as well, but I'm just doing it for the hype anyway. Okay, last character for the mid section, I'm going to put Shiva. Okay, so the next character I'm going to put in is Shiva. Obviously, this character was a big problem for a while. You know, Stomp was around, Dragon Stance was around. Now those two moves are kind of irrelevant. Dragon Stance is still decent, but Stomp is definitely dead. The character can still work with things like EX Fireball, you know, the high-low grab mix-ups and stuff like that. Her damage is okay, but a lot of the stuff that made her stronger earlier on has kind of gone away now. So, is she still decent? Yes, for sure, but she's definitely a lot weaker than she was earlier on. I'm honestly not too sure about how her matchup chart is, but I'm sure it's okay. I could see her struggling in some matchups, but overall, she's probably a decent character for the game. Alright, we're going to move up to the high mid tier now. So I think all of these characters here can definitely win on their own. They do have to work a little bit sometimes, but overall, these characters are honestly pretty strong. They're just not obnoxiously strong like the top tiers are. So let's get into those. I'm going to start it off with my boy that I just played in my most recent video, Collector. I think he's high mid tier. He has everything pretty much. He has great normals, great buttons, great strings. He has good hit confirms, good damage. Armor breaks really good. He has pretty much everything that you could want in a character, to be honest. There's not much that he doesn't have. He just doesn't have anything that's insanely over the top. So he kind of just sits around that high and mid stage. Really strong, but nothing insanely crazy either. Alright, next up I'm going to put Rain up here. A lot of people say this character's like top tier. I've heard him say they're low tier. I honestly think he's pretty good. Is he insane? No, but his movement is definitely insane. He has some pretty good tools. You know, he can cover a lot of matchups if you have the right variations and you've got the experience with him. At the end of the day, my thing is a lot about it is consistency, and I don't think he's a very consistent character as of right now. Insane movement, pretty good buttons. His damage is decent if you get the right starter. Unfortunately, you have to use Geyser Pump with him and get the 1-3-3 starter, but overall, I think he's a pretty good character. The movement alone is kind of what makes him really good, to be honest. If he didn't have the movement, he'd probably be pretty bad, but I think that kind of carries him along the way. Okay, so next up, I'm going to put Terminator in. Honestly, this character's pretty strong. I think his mix-ups are really, really good. His buttons are decent. They're not amazing, but like his down 4 is okay. His anti-airs are really good. His mid's pretty fast. You just have to make the right reads and make mix-ups go well in offense. Most of the time, damage-wise, the mix-up is in his favor. He actually does pretty decent damage from his mix-up, especially once the KBs are loaded. The character has so many options, you know, with like running grab, running cancel, run kick, command grab, overhead, low. And if you use a grenade, you can mix that up as well. So, like, he has so many options. I think he's a really good character, honestly. He does have a little bit of a struggle in the neutral, but once he's in, he's like an MKX character, so pretty insane, to be honest. Okay, so now I'm going to put Nightwolf in. Nightwolf is basically based around his throw, strike game, you know, throw, 1-1, stagger kind of mix-up game. He has pretty good matchups too, like his neutral's really good, his zoning's pretty decent. His movement's great. All of his buttons are pretty good. Good damage. The character's pretty much got everything. He just has a little bit of struggle sometimes opening up really good players, especially offline. Online, a little bit easier. He's a kind of different character online. But offline, I still think he's a really good character as well. Especially now, he's seen a lot of other players use the bird, the Hana's Wrath move, where it takes away your meter usage. So I think that move's pretty good, and it's kind of made him look a little bit better as well. Okay, next up on the list is Jax Briggs. I love Jax, honestly. He's one of my favorite characters in this game. I think he's really cool. I think they've designed him really well. The way he works is pretty solid. He can play kind of safe and he can kind of go crazy as well. His neutral is pretty good because of like back 4-2 dash punch and just his movement alone. Once he has the heat on his arms as well, heat missile is probably like one of the best projectiles in the game. His neutral is not amazing without the heat missile projectile, so you kind of got to choose where you want to use the heat. Obviously now that people are using ripped, so you get like a launcher off every hit. Really, really strong. It's made him so much scarier. He's kind of similar to Baraka in a sense where like he can sometimes struggle to get in, but once he's in, it's kind of over. However, he definitely has a lot more chances than Baraka does to get in there. Okay, next up I'm going to put Robocop. This character got a lot better once he got 1100 health. He became a lot stronger. His customs are all really good. Honestly, you can play like 20 different customs with him and they all work. He was honestly pretty good before, but now that he has 50 extra health, so many of his matchups became easier because he can just keep them out and have the out damage. Like, because of his health now, once he gets a life lead in some matchups, it's so easy to win. Just because you're chipping them away constantly, and then you're just taking the life lead and winning from that. Mid command grab's really dumb. His zoning's pretty good. His buttons are decent. That's kind of his weak point, but because of his health and his zoning, it kind of makes up for it anyway. Okay, next up, I'm going to put Scorpion. This character's matchup chart is really good. Honestly, I don't see him having that many bad matchups. Maybe a couple, but nothing crazy. He has great damage, great hit confirms. His pressure is pretty good if you make the right reads. Like, he's 2-1 staggers, 1-1 game, forward 3 stagger. He can mix all of those up pretty well. Now that he got the back 3 buff as well, where it's faster and it hits you a lot easier, it's like almost guaranteed half the time as well. So overall, Scorpion's a really solid character, super strong. There's not much that's really weak about him, honestly. His up 3 is really good as well. I think the character's awesome. He didn't really get much from customs, but overall, still just a really strong character. I've always thought Scorpion's really good anyway. Alright, next up, I'm going to put Cassie Cage. I think she's a really good character. I mained her for a while. Like, I played her for probably at least, like, 3 to 4 months, like, straight, just Cassie. Her offense is great. Like, her auto-shimmy and her throw game is awesome. Her buttons are really, really good. It's the only thing that's weak about her is breakaway. Just the fact that you can break away out of low gun so early makes it really hard for her to kind of, like, consistently punish your opponent for a lot of damage. But if you make the right reads, you can play around that and make her work. Her neutral's amazing. I know I've whiff punished people with so many different buttons. Her pressure's great. She has flipping out and a lot of options to mix it up. Glow kick, fatal blow, I could go on. There's so many good things about Cassie. It's literally just a breakaway thing, but you can definitely play around that with her for sure. Okay, so the next character I'm going to put in the higher mid is Katana. Now, a lot of people think this character's not very good. I honestly think she's a really strong character. Her matchup chart is pretty good, and I think she just plays the game very well. Like, her throw game is good, her mids are good. Back to obviously whiffing on airborne is annoying, but you don't need to use it like that anyway. Her anti-airs are pretty good, her armor break's great, her damage is really good. And the custom ability potential with this character is really, really good. She has a few sus moves, but overall they're really good. I think she can make a lot of variations work, a lot of matchups work. It's just you got to explore those and try a lot of the different moves. Obviously, like I said, some of them are pretty bad, but she definitely has a few good variations that can work at the highest level. Alright, next one in the list is going to be Aaron Black. I think this character is really good. I've always thought Aaron Black was really good. Even after like he got nerfed and got changed, I've never thought this character got dropped much in the tier list anyway. We've seen a lot of different moves from him being used, like down peacemaker, command grab, slide cancel, scud shot, acid pour. I could go on. There's a lot of great moves that he has. His matchup chart's really good, I think. His pokes are still really good. He can abuse a lot of characters with his pokes still. Controls a lot of matchups, controls the pace of the game very well. I still think he's really solid. Okay, so the next one in my high mid is going to be Kung Lao. Now that it's been a few months since Ultimate came out and we've been using customs, I think Buzzsaw is really, really, really good. I've always thought Buzzsaw was good, to be honest. Early on, it was a little bit sus because people didn't know how to use it. But that has definitely developed over time. Buzzsaw is a really, really good move. Orbiting Hat's still really good. Honestly, he has like 5 different variations that are all really good. So this character can definitely work at the highest level. He's really strong. The only thing he doesn't have is like a really good range move. But I mean, he's down 4 and his forward 1 are decent. And obviously he has the crazy jump-ins, but I think he's a really good character. He's just not insanely, insanely strong. Okay, next up, I'm going to put Jade. This is one of my favorite characters. You guys know, this is one of my mains for like almost over a year. I played this character at like every tournament I traveled to. This was like the character I played the most for sure. Alright, so the next character I'm going to put in the high mid is Sindel. I know a lot of you guys hate Sindel, man. I know she's mad annoying. Don't worry, I get it. This is probably my main character right now. She has pretty much everything you could ask for. Just her mids are kind of slow, and that's where she kind of struggles in my opinion. Obviously, she can play around that with like poking to backdash or like jumping, short hop, stuff like that. But she can get kind of mashed on a little bit. Obviously, EX Scream is insane. Her damage is really good. Her overhead's insane. Scream cancel is really good. Low projectile, like I could go on. Like she has so many good tools. At the end of the day, though, forward 4 up 3 is absolutely insane. She just has a few bad matchups, and the slow mid thing is kind of annoying, but the rest is really, really good. Okay, so next up, I'm gonna put Kotal Khan. Initially, in my first ultimate tier list, I had him in top tier, but I'm gonna set that back a little bit now. I still think the character's really good, but I think like short hopping against him and like jumping and kind of like mashing as well. Also similar to the Sindel thing, like his slower mids. Obviously, his command grab's really, really good, and he's got great damage. By the end of the day, it can be sometimes hard to be consistent with him just because of those little short hops, jumps. You know, if you make the right reads against Kotal, you do pretty well. Obviously, he can do it the same way. So I'm just going to put him in the higher mid. I think he's really good. He just can sometimes struggle in that regard, and he has a couple harder matchups as well. He's still mad cheap, though, I'm not going to lie. All right, next on the list, I'm going to put Spawn. I was creeping on like putting him around top tier. He's right on the edge for sure. He has great buttons, insane damage. You guys all have seen the damage. You guys know exactly what I'm talking about. He has some pretty good custom abilities, but honestly, for the most part, his best thing is just his damage anyway. Obviously, the ECKB thing is really, really good, but that's not going to win him every single game. So he just doesn't get a lot against people jumping his throw game or his mid. But other than that, he's really, really good. Okay, so I'm just going to put all of these guys in one go because I can say the same thing about pretty much all of them. So the last 5 before the top tier are going to be Shang Tsung, Jade, Raiden, Noob Saibot, and Sub-Zero. So I actually think all these characters have pretty similar strengths in regards to their matchups. You know, Noob, Sub, Raiden, Jade, and Shang don't lose that many matchups. Maybe like 1 or 2. Like honestly, not that many. Jade is kind of in a weird spot where she does kind of struggle sometimes because of her lower damage. But she can win so many matchups just because of glow and her normals that I've put her up really high as well. And this is honestly where I think she is. Like I've played her a lot, even especially since Ultimate, and there isn't many matchups where I find it hard, except for like 2 or 3, and they're kind of weird counter picks anyway. But for the most part, these characters play the game really well. They have great customs. They can mix it up very well with their customs. Sub-Zero is insanely cheap, but I didn't put him in top tier just because I think he's a little bit overrated because of online. He can still play the game very, very well offline, but he's kind of a different character, so I kind of just want to keep him in there, to be honest. And now it's time for the top tiers. Any surprises here? Probably not. I think you guys all expected these characters anyway. Okay, so best in the game, still in my opinion, Setron 100% best in the game. Second best, Jax Briggs. Then I think it's Joker, Liu Kang, Fujin, Kano, Cabal, Garrus, Johnny Cage. Okay, so I'm actually going to put Kano up. I've moved him here in front of Fujin, just because I think he's actually in the top 5 for sure. Not too much has changed with the top tier since my last tier list, other than Kano definitely getting better. A lot of people, like, initially were kind of struggling with Kano still after the buffs. But, you know, Customs has changed the character completely. He's insane. He's super cheap. He can win pretty much every matchup with his robbery if he wants to. We saw Rewind do insane work with him at WePlay, and we've seen Kano have a lot of success since then as well. Setron's still been the best in the game for like 2 years pretty much. Jax Briggs, you know, insane damage, insane mobility, great customs. Not much to say about her. Like, I'm not really going to go into detail with the top tier because they haven't really changed at all. Cabal, the reason he's up there is obviously because of air gas. Like, that move is just insane. He can do whatever he wants pretty much now. Super obnoxious character. Honestly, these guys just play the game very well. Like, these characters don't lose many matchups, and if they do, it like doesn't really matter because they're so strong they can just win them anyway. Like, on paper, it's a losing matchup, but because of how cheap the character is, they can always kind of rob and make a comeback or, like, you know, fight around that anyway. Whereas some of the weaker characters in their losing matchups don't have that extra tool to kind of, like, push it to the edge. Overall, at the end of the day, I think this game's an awesome game. I think the only thing that I didn't like was that the top 5, maybe besides Kano, obviously, were kind of the same for, like, the whole game. You know, Setron, Jackie, and Liu Kang have been in top 3 pretty much since launch. Obviously, I think Joker's better than Liu right now, but I still think they're all insane. I think the top 5 is just absolutely insane. They're not even close to the rest. Like, obviously, top 10 is pretty close. Maybe Johnny's a little bit right on the edge, but there's a lot of ways you could move this around. Like, a lot of the higher mids could be higher. A lot of the lower mids could probably be higher or lower. You know, there's a lot of ways you can move around. The game's balance overall is pretty good besides like the top 5. So I think in the long term, the game actually had pretty good balance. Early on, it was kind of sus, but then it got better as time went on. I think for the most part, you can play any character in this game and it can work. It really just depends on which character you want to play and how hard you want to try to win. Okay, well, that's gonna be the tier list. Let me know what you guys think, man. Is this cap? Am I talking facts? Let me know what you guys think. I'm pretty sure, I'm pretty confident with what I said. I believe in it. I believe in it. I honestly think the game's in a pretty good spot. I think the balance was pretty good for the most part. But this will be my last tier list. I'm not gonna make another one for this game, so this is my opinion. It might change if characters randomly show up and start cooking, but for the most part, I don't see it changing from this point forward. Let me know what you guys think in the comments, man. I'll see you guys in the next video. I'm dropping a video every 2 days now, if you guys have noticed. So I'm doing 3 videos a week instead of 2. So drop a comment, let me know what you guys think, and I'll see you boys in the next one.